feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks and coming at you Tuesday morning. It's February 4th after the Wolves' 2-point loss at home to the Kings on Monday night. Obviously, a disappointing loss, being as the Kings literally just traded away their best player a day before the game. We will have Wolves beat writer Chris Hine here with us shortly to discuss that game and just kind of some of the themes that have been percolating of late with this Wolves team. From the defense, we're going to talk some Jaylen Clark. Naz Reid is on fire recently, and just kind of how this team has been playing more recently with Julius Randle out, Dante DiVincenzo out, and kind of trying to stay afloat here. But I figured we'd start this episode with the kind of the biggest story in the NBA right now, which is that Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis trade. And I had the chance to kind of ask some of the Wolves players and Finch there's their thoughts on the Luka trade after the game, before and after the game last night. And I figured that maybe you guys would want to hear what some of those what players and Finch had to say about that. So we're just going to start the episode with me playing you a few clips on what Ant and Rudy and Finch just how the Luka trade, how they read it, how it impacted them. And they all had very, like, Ant's answer is a very Ant answer, as Rudy's is a very Rudy answer, as Finch's the same. But I'll just start right here. Here's Anthony Edwards on the Luka Doncic trade.
The NBA. They say that nobody know about the trade. Yeah, so that's crazy. At 25, they traded probably the best scorer in the NBA at 25. He didn't know about it. So it's a lot more digging somebody got to do to find out why he got traded. Because you don't just trade him at 25. He just went to the finals, you know what I'm saying? So I feel bad for Luka, man, because I saw some on YouTube that say he just bought a crib and everything in Dallas. So that sucks, man. That sucks.
Does it inform, like,
everybody?
You at 23.
Everybody get informed, yeah.
I was going to say, like,
I'm scared.
How you see the league.
I'm scared. Tim, hey, if you're going to trade me, let me know, dog. When Luka got traded, anybody is able to get traded at that point.
Well, before the game, Finch was saying that they were very happy with their investment in you. Does that give you at least a little comfort?
Woosah. Thank God. I just bought a crib, too.
All right, so that was Ant. This Rudy answers a little bit longer, but Rudy and Ant talk a little bit differently. So here's me asking Rudy about the Luka trade.
What your reaction to that was in the moment, and then maybe after the moment of kind of thinking about how those teams have evolved.
Sure. I mean, it was hard to believe it at first. I didn't think. I mean, with all these fake accounts that post stupid stuff every day, I was making really sure that
rereading like Sham Sharan.
Sham Sharan. Sure, it was a real one. But my reaction was, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy when it's possible that there's something that we don't know, right? But it says a lot about, I mean, the state of the game right now, in a way where a young superstar is not untouchable, and I mean,
is that a concerning thing?
Positive.
Yeah, is that
I think there's
concerning?
positives and negatives.
Yeah.
I mean, the positives that, in a way that it shows that no one is untouchable, but the negative is that, I think you lose a little bit of that loyalty aspect and humanity aspect. When I think our sport is bigger than just a sport, and there's I lived that, even though I knew I was different, because I knew I was potentially living, and I was okay with the outcome. But you have when you're attached to a community, when you give your all for a team, for an organization, for a city, it's not just a business. It's more than that. And then it's I mean, we know what we signed up for, right, when we come to this league, but I think there's. I mean, I think when Dirk comes back to Dallas and he sees the statue, and it feels special to him. And when I come back to Utah, it feels special to me. I don't have a statue, yet, but it feels special, and I think Luka probably feels the same. I mean, would have loved to feel the same now. He got traded, and he feels probably a little betrayed, right? But that's, I mean, yeah, it's hard to know when you don't have all the information, and we'll see what time reveals everything. So we'll see how the next 5 years go, and we'll be able to see how to talk then.
I will remember to talk to Rudy Gobert in 5 years. We'll break down that trade. Oh, that was an interesting answer there. And here's Finch.
What's your reaction to the Doncic trade?
Yeah, like everyone else, just shocked. But my shock lifted pretty quickly just because it's the NBA right now, and I think anything can happen. I think the new CBA environment is going to kind of throw up more, of these types of trades, just because organizations, it's a lot of money, and they're gonna think twice about how they lock that up, how they lock that money up, and who they lock it up in, and there's always going to be teams out there willing to take on superstars, and rightfully so. But not every team is going to be in a position to kind of go forward. So I think it's something we're going to see more of as obviously maybe not to that level every single time, but.
So that's Finch. I hope that was worthwhile for you all to hear at the beginning. Like I said, it's kind of the biggest story not just, is it the biggest story in the sports world right now? Super Bowl is going on. It's definitely the biggest story in the NBA right now. And that's Ant, Rudy, and Finch, some of the leaders of this team, their reaction to that. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about some of that stuff with Chris here in a moment. Just quickly before we get started, I want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and we got about 5 days away from the Super Bowl, and it's time to make some daily fantasy lineups at PrizePicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. I made a simple one this morning. Let's take advantage of that Patrick Mahomes free square. If Patrick Mahomes throws for 1 yard, you win that one. I'm going to say Jalen Hurts does not have a rushing touchdown in this game. That was kind of like 50-50. I think you think about the way the Chiefs were guarding or defending the Bills and their sort of tush-push situation. That would be the main way that Hurts would get in. Is that a 50-50 proposition? I'm going to say Jalen Hurts does not get a touchdown there. And I'll say Travis Kelce does. That one is demon moded. So you get some extra juice on the Travis Kelce one. I could see that happening. So just with this lineup that I have right here, Mahomes throws for a yard, Jalen Hurts does not score a touchdown, and Travis Kelce does. Well, if that happens, that's 6-1 on your money. Even if you just do $5, that would pay 30, 20. It's a 120. I think it's fun to make a bunch of these sort of different lineups. And as always, you can just do them for $5. It doesn't need to be a big earning thing, but just a fun thing to have going on the games. PrizePicks.com or the PrizePicks app. If maybe you haven't used PrizePicks before, daily fantasy, and you're like, hey, I want to do some stuff for the Super Bowl, download the app, use the promo code Dane. That helps me let them know that you came for me, and it also gets you $50 in your account for a first time sign up bonus. So again, PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane. All right, let's bring in author on the New York Times bestsellers list right now. I think it's Chris Hine. We'll have him here in a moment.
Hey, yeah.
All right, we are now joined by Wolves beat writer Chris Hine from the Star Tribune, author of the now available for pre-order book, The Incredible Journey of NBA Rising Star Anthony Edwards. I didn't say anything on Twitter because I wanted to do it here. Just congratulations. I know what went into this for you this summer, and I'm just really, really proud of you. You got it done, man. Yeah, congrats.
We're still getting it done. Actually,
Still
there's
getting
still
it
stuff I'm doing on it right now.
Okay,
We're not 100% signed, sealed, and delivered here, but we are 95% of the way there. No, it's a surreal feeling to see it up for sale right now to see the cover, to finally kind of have the title, the cover, all of it out there in the world available for people to buy. And it's very, very heartwarming to see everybody send their receipts, the other day in the replies, and and there's more to come. I'm sure, as this process unfolds over the next couple of months, I'll be doing a lot more podcasts and radio and appearances, hopefully in-person things. And, hopefully I'll have a chance to sign people's books if they want to come out, things like that. We'll figure all that out.
We got some stuff in the works.
We got some stuff in the works here with this podcast, in coming months. So thank you and Kyle for helping me out with that. Surreal feeling. And I really do hope people enjoy it. I think they will. If you're a Wolves fan, I really hope that you look at this as almost like a collector's item, for something to just kind of have with all your Wolves stuff, regardless of whether you actually read the book or not. Just buy it and put it on a shelf somewhere. That's fine too. We still get the money. So that's what I hope. But I do think you will come to appreciate Ant's story, Ant's journey, both before he got to the NBA and during his time with the Timberwolves, in a way that hopefully you hadn't before. I know a lot of fans here probably are at least familiar with the rough outlines of his story. But this hopefully fills in some of those lines, some of the details from his youth, some of the details of the draft process, which was probably my favorite chapter to write. And then some behind the scenes stuff from, the previous 4 years with the Wolves, plus his Olympic experience this summer.
If you do want to be one of those people to send Chris a receipt for this episode, I put it in the show notes below. So if you're watching on YouTube, it's right there. There's a link to I did the Amazon option, and same if you're listening in podcast version. If you just go to the show notes with the description of the episode is, and there you'll find a link there. Also, I did just Google Ant book, which. It came up. A lot of books about actual ants, but if you just Google ant book, you will see it as well. Congratulations again. I mean, we'll talk about it more, but Chris has sent me, just to reiterate some of what you were saying, you've sent me some clips and stuff from it over the course of time, and as we know, what the interesting stuff is often things that get uncovered years later, and Chris did a lot of that in this book with kind of some big anecdotes and then just some funny things behind the scenes as well. It's go get it. How much is it? Sorry, should we say that?
$30. Various places might be offering little discounts here and there. I'll have a link I'll tweet out through my publisher HarperCollins. You don't have to just buy it on Amazon. You could buy it on any book retailer that you prefer, independent, local, around Minnesota. Or just other national outlets if you prefer not to use Amazon for that reason, as well as available everywhere. And the release date is June 3rd right now, so the physical copies will be in your local bookstores then. That's a really weird thing for me to say. I'm not going to lie.
That's awesome, man. It's awesome. Congratulations. All right, let's talk a little bit about last night's game and kind of some themes that are percolating with this team of late. The biggest thing specific to the Wolves' loss to the Kings last night was clearly defense. I'll kind of let Finch set the tone here with his response about the defense after the game.
We committed a cardinal sin. We got into an up and down scoring affair with a team that really likes to score. We had to make this game about defense, and we weren't able to do that. Played right alongside them for most of the game, and they were going to make shots, and they made shots all throughout the game as a result. Our defense is not where it needs to be right now.
What do you think that was for the defense tonight? Obviously, it's a challenging team with Sacramento, but
I didn't like we weren't into them. We weren't taking away the things that they wanted to do. They were able to get to their spots easily. They're all gifted scorers, and when they do that, they're hard to stop.
Chris, what have you thought just kind of about the defense over the course of the last few weeks? What I wrote down here is in my notes is just the defense not like feeling as good as the sum of their parts lately. Numbers aren't terrible, but how did it stand out to you last night and just kind of in recent weeks, given that this team's identity is supposed to be defense?
Yeah, it feels that way. I wonder how much of it is being down two guys and incorporating new players into the rotation a little more than you were before. How does that affect the defense? Just the little subtle things like communication or where guys need to be, kind of intuitively that maybe the regular 8 rotation players kind of knew. But also I think this is kind of this point in the season where even last year the defense had slippage at this point in the season. Like, I think it just is one of those things that happens in the course of a long season, especially before you get to the All-Star break, as you may be running on fumes a little bit post a long road trip, a lot of games in a short amount of time. I think it's kind of natural that you see a little bit of slippage on the defensive end of the floor. It happened last year too, and they were able to get it back. You're able to regroup, take the All-Star break, and then they were fine essentially the rest of the year, and then going into the postseason. But I do think with the amount of effort that the Wolves put into that end of the floor, the amount of physical energy they spend kind of in a fly around mentality every night, you get to early February and you just might be a step slow. You just might be that little whatever it is percentage. It might be affecting you. And I think you saw it last night from the jump. Sacramento was getting a whole bunch of open threes. We saw even Washington was getting a bunch of open looks early, and they were hitting them. And, if they're not hitting them, then maybe the Wolves win these games. But they were allowing a lot of open looks, especially early in these games, to both Washington and Sacramento, and they were trying to address it. I think they eventually started running to Sacramento off the 3-point line last night. But, it's a very good mid-range team with Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan. And, that's the one thing this Wolves defense kind of concedes is open mid-range shots, and those guys killed them. So I think it's a little bit of Sacramento's style of play last night. I think it's this point in the season contributing to a little wear and tear on the tires for the defense as a whole. And I think, they could probably use the benefit of the All-Star break to regroup, re-energize, and get healthy again as well.
I looked up some numbers. I was surprised to see that the slippage that I think we're both sensing, watching this team recently isn't, that it doesn't really pop in the numbers. And, defense is always kind of that way. And, what even is a defensive rating over 2 weeks? It's just such a small sample. But they are 5th in defense over the last 2 weeks when they're 7th on the season. They're 9th in defense since January 1st. So it's not been bad. It is different than the number 1 defense. Like, obviously that's true, but that compared to last season where it was so often and so consistently a spark for them. Like, I don't think last season's team puts forth a defensive performance like last night. Or they didn't. And maybe you're right. Maybe there was something in January or February, but when I was thinking about it, I just think there's a pretty big gap between being the 7th and 1st defense. And maybe the difference even is to have it be your identity and really be something you lean on, which Finch is absolutely leaning on defense more and more as they've had this. Well, as they're dealing with injuries, he's making defensive shifts, to the rotation and who plays. And it's just not as potent when you're like, does that make sense when he's 7th overall defense versus the first overall? There's something not as just not as potent about it. I think games like last night is where you feel that.
It's the difference. Sometimes how many times did we say last year or even coming into this year, like they were able to really close with defense in a way, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that would be how they would win close games. They were terrible offensively late in games, but they would just shut the other team down. Mm-hmm. And that's how they would win. You didn't see that last night. You didn't see it against Washington. Like you're trying to shut I think it was very telling that like the last 2 field goals Sacramento got were were easy layups for Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan last night. They just went right to the bucket, almost no resistance at all, and got easy layups with 1 minute and 30 seconds left in that game. That does not happen a season ago, regardless of injury or wear and tear. So it's only been 2 games. I mean, you're going back 2 weeks for these numbers. So yeah, they look good over the last 2 weeks. They were just on a 5-game winning streak. But even in that Utah game, Utah came out in that game and was up 15 on the Wolves before they got their act together that night. And I think they ended up scoring in the 1 teens. So even going back to that Utah game, the defense was a little shaky as well. They just outscored the Jazz, that particular night and came away with a runaway win. So I think you're right. There's just a different notch of intensity between number 1 and number 7. They haven't closed games as well with their defense this season as they did a year ago. That to me is where that really shows up, that difference, the ability to just clamp an opponent down in the last couple of minutes. Instead, Sacramento last night was able to get to some very easy shots with its go-to players out, even after trading De'Aaron Fox. It looked like they looked no worse for the trade last night. That's for sure.
What about Jaden and Rudy? Because I feel like they're playing well defensively, and so maybe it's to your take there of like it's other pieces, or I don't know. Are you not seeing the same?
Other complaints that Finch had about the defense this year revolved around Rudy's rim protection, right? And multiple times this season, Finch has called out Rudy. They need him to be better. They need him to rebound better. They need him to, be who he was. That's not what's happening right now. And Finch kind of laid it at the feet of the point of attack defense, which kind of leads you to believe it's more the perimeter guys, like whether it's Ant or Na or even Jaden at times, Mike. It's more the perimeter guys that have to kind of, as they like to say sometimes, guard your yard, right? So I think that's where the issue is right now. Like I said, other times we've seen it's Rudy. We've seen Julius sometimes struggle, especially earlier in the season when it came to figuring out where he needed to be, low man responsibilities, things like that. Can't blame Julius Randle right now for what's going on. So it's a little bit of that. I think it's that maybe getting a little more of that guard your yard kind of mentality back in this defense, making it be a little more of a point of pride to come out on your home floor and guard some guardable teams and win some winnable games. Like it's kind of just digging a little deeper than they are these last couple of games here.
I wasn't thinking of bringing up Julius Randle in this at all because it just doesn't go to my head to be like, oh yeah, missing Julius Randle would hurt the defense. But in the one area that we would say Julius Randle has been actually good defensively this season is just in switch situations or in guard your yard, like isolation spots. Where Julius has hurt them is, earlier on in the season, we talked about a lot, like confusion in coverage with Rudy, not closing possessions with defensive rebounding. But it has kind of been the one thing that Julius has been pretty good at all season is like, okay, I am switched on to DeMar DeRozan here. Like I can move my feet, stay in front here and guard. I mean, we're going to talk about Julius a little bit later. And obviously first, second, and third things of value he brings are offense, but it probably is more so to what you were saying before of like, it is just mixing in different personnel at this time. Even if it's personnel that is quote unquote better than Julius Randle defensively, maybe just because it's a different player. There's a different impact there, but this is something that's got to get like righted this week. As they have this homestand into the trade deadline, into the All-Star break. It's pretty clear, particularly with Dante DiVincenzo and Randle injured, this is not a good offensive team right now. And they do need to, lean on this defense to be solid a little bit more. And you hope you still keep getting good offensive games from Naz Reid. You hope Rob Dillingham can give you a spark. You hope as Ant gets healthier, he gets back to having some more of those games he was having before he had this illness. But right, is it still to you like the identity when you think about the Wolves is defense and has to start with defense?
Yeah, 100%. It has to start with defense because, like I said before, they're not good enough offensively to hang their hat on that. They're not consistent enough offensively. And in late in games, they're not good enough offensively to be a quote unquote offensive team. They have to always think defense first. And that's how they fuel their offense. Sometimes I think they were doing a better job of getting out in transition or semi-transition, before Julius got hurt, and he was a part of that. And that starts with good defense and ending possessions after one shot. And Sacramento had 13 second chance points in the first half last night. That's an old problem that popped back up. They got Domantas Sabonis misses 2 free throws last night, and the Kings get the rebound and then get a bucket off of it with like 5.5 minutes left last night. Everybody's celebrating free chicken. Meanwhile, Sacramento's grabbing the rebound and DeRozan's hitting a 15-footer to give them 2 points on that possession in a 2-point game.
Yeah.
So, it's those little things that crop back up last night that they have done a good job over the years of stamping out. And even from earlier this year, especially the rebounding had gotten seemingly better, but it became an issue last night. And again, Julius Randle maybe being out contributes a little bit to that. DiVincenzo being out, who I think is a pretty good rebounder for a guard, being out contributes a little bit to that. And you're just kind of seeing that mixing in different guys. It just has an overall effect on, and it's that little bit that maybe you're missing in a close game, that possession here, possession there, and all of a sudden, you're on the wrong end of this.
Let's grab a break here. We'll talk about some Jaylen Clark in a minute. Today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty, and I know that a handful of you have worked with Adriana to buy homes, and that's really cool. I feel good about being a part of that. And the reason a handful of you have worked with Adriana is, one, she's here locally, Minnesota and Wisconsin, licensed realtor with Coldwell Banker, but she's also really good at making this accessible and understandable. And the first process in this, as we've been telling you about working with Adriana for a while, is just setting up one of those free consultations with her to understand what it is you have to spend, or if you're selling your house, what it is you're trying to get back, and what your next steps there are. And really, if you are in the home buying process, you need somebody like Adriana in your corner, and we would love it if you worked with her. And you can learn more about her, figure out a way to sign up for one of those free consultations by either going to thedancingrealtor.com or by calling or texting her at 715-304-9920. Book one of those strategy sessions, and you will also be entered to win a pair of free lower level seats to a Wolves game later this season. Today's show is also brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino, and they are doing with K-Fan a whole big K-Fan power trip takeover this weekend, starting on Thursday, the February 6th through February 8th. They are having all sorts of different events. They're doing the initials game event on February 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. Then on Friday morning, they're broadcasting. They are broadcasting the can you hit mute on your mic there, bud?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
They're broadcasting the Power Trip morning show from 5:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then Chris Hockey, who's part of the Power Trip morning show, he has a show Friday night. There's just a ton going on, and they're giving away a trip to the Super Bowl for Sunday. So it really would be a fun time to get down to Treasure Island. And I know if you listen to this, you probably are familiar with or listen to KFAN and the Power Trip. For more information, tickets, and the full schedule, visit ticasino.com. All right, Chris, an encouraging piece of the defense, or just an encouraging, piece of what's been happening recently is Jaylen Clark out of nowhere. I was sitting next to you in Phoenix, and we were like, yo, is that Jaylen Clark about to check into the game? I mean, how crazy that was 6 days? Was that six days ago or something like that?
Yeah, 6 days ago. Yep.
now he's just like a staple of the rotation,
Yeah.
and seems like he's owning it. I'm just gonna play that Ant clip from last night on Jaylen Clark first year because I thought it was funny. We'll talk about Jaylen.
What have you seen from Jaylen since he's been getting more minutes up there?
Clark, I love Jaylen. I love him. Monk said today, man, thank God y'all took that strong dude out. Like, who is that? He harassing. Yeah, he's a menace out there on the defensive end for sure. And he made great plays tonight offensively too, so been doing good.
Good analysis by Ant there. Right? Seriously. Like,
yeah.
A menace, harassing, and he has been like the offensive part matters, right? Like there's a lot of guys in the NBA who don't play in rotations that can play defense like Jaylen Clark. And the key to be able to get that 15, 16 minutes a night right is also being able to not be a problem on offense. And I've been like, credit to him. That's really grown and is making this work. What if just, I guess this first week of Jaylen Clark being in the rotation, what stood out to you about it?
Impressive. I'm 4 games now. He's been basically the same in all 4 games, consistent defensively. He's looked to knock down his shots. He's got confidence in it. He's hit a few. I talked to him after the Utah game as well. And the newsletter today has the lead is Jaylen Clark, kind of his rehab process coming back from that. So I had a nice chat with him after the Utah game, and he basically said, I don't really wish this on anybody, kind of what I went through, some setbacks, 1 or 2 setbacks here and there. You feel like you're not doing much at first, and it's a little frustrating because you want to get out there and show what you got. And then he felt like in summer league, he's like, even summer league, I was still ramping back up. He's like, I didn't feel like myself physically, and it was frustrating for him in summer league because he was close, but he wasn't all the way back, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think playing in the G League a little bit this year, he felt all the way back, and that's what you're seeing now. Finally, nearly 2 years after he ruptured his Achilles, he finally feels like he's all the way back. And it just goes to show you what kind of an injury that can be and how devastating it can be to somebody's career. But the Wolves were in a position where they were able to draft him, essentially stash him for a year, let him rehabilitate. And you hoped that by year 2, year 3, he's able to show what he's got. And that's what you're seeing right now is he's come back healthy, seemingly himself, the player that they thought they were getting in the draft, that they saw before he got hurt. And yeah, he's looked good. And if you are squinting down the road at what this roster may look like next season, if they have to let Nickeil Alexander-Walker go in free agency, is Jaylen Clark, does he kind of just slide right into that role, that 3-and-D role that Nickeil may vacate after this season?
Nickeil has become such a good,
than that too.
Yeah, it's just such a good version of that. And I'm not saying Jaylen can't. I think you're right. That's the hope. That's that's the hope of what he can become there. I think the first thing is to me, if we talk about future, is he is on a 2-way contract still. He signed a 2-year 2-way contract when he was drafted a season ago, and I think the discussion is, do you want to give this guy a real contract? Do you want to lock him up to, I always called it the Gupta special deals that Naz Reid signed or Josh Minot signed when they entered the league, which is a 4-year contract at the minimum, but each year is non-guaranteed, which is like literally the worst contract you could be on as a player. But like $2.5 million of guaranteed money is very different than being on a 2-way contract. So I say that to mean I think the Wolves have an opportunity to, if that theory you're bringing up, Chris, is right, of like, hey, this actually is a rotation player, which again, first 4 games signaling it is. I think about how great of a value Naz was those first, and that was before Naz Reid was Naz Reid, but just being a rotation piece, making $2 million a year without the long-term commitment to it. Though that's exactly those are exactly the type of contracts that teams need to sign when they are in a salary cap situation as rough as the Wolves are. And so, watching the game last night, I'm like, is it time, for that contract to, to lock him into something more long-term? Because whether it's Nikhil or whoever, like this, over the next couple of years, there are just going to be pieces that fall off of the ship. And it's important to have cheap, but effective pieces that you kind of replace them with. And Jaylen is the number one, the number one character who right now that we could think of becoming that. I did think, do you remember this from before the game? I thought Finch's answer about Jaylen Clark was interesting in his pregame media, because I think it talks about why he has been playing right now more than any of the young guys. Obviously, Josh Minot has, been removed from the rotation. Terrence Shannon Jr. hasn't got an opportunity, and Jaylen Clark is even playing more than Rob Dillingham is often. And this isn't me saying that's right or wrong, but this is why Finch is playing Jaylen Clark more than he is the other young players. I thought this was telling.
But the way he's kind of stepped up these last couple games here, has he even exceeded expectations?
Yeah, I think so. And I would say, in a very understated way, he just doesn't make mistakes. And a lot of rookie players go in there and they make mistakes, and they might make two mistakes and one or two good plays if you're lucky. But he hasn't made mistakes. He hasn't tried to do a whole ton. And the first key to being a young player when you're earning your first minutes is to not hurt the team. And so he's been above the norm there.
He's starting to feel like Finch is an old school coach.
Yes.
Right.
That is exactly the mindset of a coach, where it's like, I'd rather play the guy that doesn't screw up. Who maybe has the lower ceiling, right?
Yeah.
But I'd rather play the guy that doesn't screw up and doesn't drive me mad by missing a defensive assignment or whatever, over the guy who might be able to go on a scoring binge potentially, but may make mistakes and be taken advantage of on the defensive end of the floor. It is a very old school coach mindset, 100%.
And it's the same reason that Mike Conley's closing games over Rob Dillingham. It's why Joe Ingles played. And again, this isn't, I don't know what's right. I'm just telling you, or what we're trying to do with what we're doing is express why things are happening.
Trying to give you a glimpse into his mindset as to why he does things that the fan base doesn't really, or the social media crowd doesn't really want him to do. And it boils down to that: mistakes. Why did Josh Minot, why is he on the bench right now? Game plan mistakes, right? That's what Finch said. Jaylen Clark playing right now doesn't make mistakes. Why does Rob come out sometimes? Not sure if they can trust him defensively at times, right?
Or even turnovers too.
Or even turnovers. Yeah, that's true. So, but player like Rob, that's going to come with the territory of the type of player that Rob Dillingham is, who has the ball in his hands a lot, and given his size on the defensive end of the floor. But with Jaylen Clark, he can play a safe game offensively, right? He doesn't have to have the ball in his hands. He could stand in the corner, take the open shots when they come to him. And defensively, obviously, that's his calling card. So, he's going to be alert and guarding some of the best players on that end of the floor. And I thought I was interested to hear Ant's comments about Malik Monk, because I actually did think Jaylen Clark did the best job guarding Malik Monk of anybody on the team last night. And Malik Monk was flustered by Jaylen Clark on multiple possessions last night.
Well, who are the guys, Chris, that get Jaden sometimes? It's the really quick ones. Right?
Yeah.
And Jaylen Clark plays like more into the ball. And he's going to end up being like a pretty heavy foul guy, I think, too, because he's like I'm not going to let you take that first step guy. Whereas Jaden McDaniels is more of a, like, I'm going to chase you to the rim and I'm going to stop you. I'm going to
use my size a little bit.
Length. Yeah. So it is a different type of, there are different types of good perimeter defenders. Like, I think I think Jaden McDaniels is one archetype of perimeter defender. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker, his slithery snake style is a different one. And now Jaylen Clark is more of like the Dort, right? The force.
He's going to be physical. Yeah, he's going to be more physical. Yeah, and I think that's going to come with time. To your point, he might end up fouling a lot early on, but you can see the progression of, especially when guys are known as defensive guys, and we've seen this with players even like Pat Bev come through here. Sure. It's like the amount of things that like a Pat Bev got away with, or because he was known as a defensive guy, like you start to get a little leeway from officials with that stuff as you become known as a defensive guy, as maybe you develop a little bit more of a reputation in the league. So maybe at first Jaylen Clark's going to go through some growing pains with that, with the fouling. But I guarantee you, if he sticks around after like a couple years, he's going to start to get the benefit of more whistles from the officials. I see it with Nickeil too, even as Nickeil has become more of a defensive reputation kind of guy. He gets more of the benefit of the doubt, and he gets more offensive foul calls on moving screens and things like that. He's getting a little bit of the Mike Conley treatment, I think, sometimes when he falls down on screens, right? So I think it's a gradual. It's one of the kind of cool things about covering the NBA. You see kind of how the officials react to certain guys when it comes to their reputations. And I think Jaden doesn't get in as much foul trouble as he used to anymore either. So maybe he's starting to get some respect in that way. And maybe he's just also changed his game as well. But I think, that might be a thing early on for Jaylen Clark. But if he's part of this rotation and he's guarding that way consistently, he will eventually get the respect of the officials.
And I think he's got like the vet mentality that he knows that. I mean, he brought that, what Chris is talking about when we interviewed him in Phoenix after that game, his first game in the rotation. That's what Jaylen said was some of those things. Is like, there's some reputational stuff. I need to show them the ways in which I defend. Like,
he's absolutely right.
And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's a good awareness. I mean, he is a player that has a real awareness of like, I'm not that good at offense. And right now. And that stuff matters, to be able to focus on the things that you're good at when you were a late second round pick, coming back from an Achilles surgery, coming on a 2-way contract. Of like, there's a reason Jaylen Clark is earning a role with by not having mistakes. It's because that's his entire like focus, is to be that style of player that isn't making mistakes. And I found it to be, I mean, these type of things, like you said, are some of the most fun to cover and watch a player kind of come from nowhere into being something. And I mean, I'm curious to see what that looks like for the rest of the season with Jaylen Clark once Dante DiVincenzo comes back into the rotation. Is he kind of like a left-handed pitcher that
I think he becomes a specialist at that point, right? He becomes like a one batter specialist, like in baseball.
I think so.
I know you can't just pitch to one batter anymore in baseball.
But back when we used to watch,
when we used to, in our day, you could bring a pitcher in for one batter. Yeah,
love it.
So I think he probably ends up becoming something like that, like a hey, go guard, a Malik Monk type for 4 possessions or whatever it is, right? I got a question about that in my mailbag this week, which is like, what do you see for the young players when everybody's back healthy? And I answered it to the point of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I think Finch may just go back to the top 8 again. Like, I that's just how he rolls. That's it. I don't know if Dillingham is going to be a permanent part of the rotation. I don't know if Jaylen Clark is going to be a permanent part of the rotation when Julius and Dante come back. I don't know. I tend to think almost not.
Right.
And especially as you get in the postseason, when those minutes become even more consolidated. I don't know.
I mean, I expect no. I expect
right. I would expect no too. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it ever gets deeper than 9. And if you're fully healthy, who 6, 7, 8 are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's even gonna be thin for Dillingham there too. So deal with those problems when that day comes. They have the opposite problem right now where they're trying to navigate playing in with a different roster than they're used to. The main thing for these last 2 games, for our last topic, no Julius Randle. and didn't have him for the second half of the Utah game, but also missing in the Washington game and the Sacramento game. Naz Reid gets the start, and he was terrific last night, has been terrific. I mean, I was just going through some of these numbers. I'm just going to read this off. Last 12 games, Naz Reid has made 43 of his 72 three-point attempts. That's 60%. And 72, that's 6 a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since January 1st, turn of the new year, 53 of his 95 three-point attempts. That's 56% from 3. On the season, he's made 107 of his 253 attempts after a slow start to the year. That's still 42.3%. So I was on Cleaning the Glass. I clicked on, 3-point percentage, and the player directly below him in 3-point percentage this season is the starting center in the Eastern Conference for the New York Knicks is Karl Anthony Towns, who is having an incredible season, and Cat is shooting 41.9% from 3. Naz shoots way more threes than Karl did last year, and then Karl is right now for the Knicks. This season, Karl is shooting 4.7 threes per game in 35 minutes per game. Naz is taking 5.2 threes per game in 25.5 minutes per game. So if you do the per 100 possessions, Naz is taking 10 threes per 100 possessions, and Karl is taking 6.7. So in Naz Reid, you are getting even more 3-point volume. You're getting the same, or in this case right now, a slightly higher 3-point percentage. And I think that when incorporated into the offense, when Julius Randle is healthy to do the things that Julius Randle produces offensively, the 5-out look, the drawn to, the kick stuff. And when Rudy and Ant are effectively playing together in pick and roll, which we've seen more of, Naz bolsters all of that by being a player one pass away that you have to freak out about. Like, you cannot come in to help on Naz. You cannot come in to, try and take away the lob to Rudy. Because if you leave that open, Naz is going to can that thing at a 60% rate right now.
Right.
Like, it is extremely important, obviously very relevant right now with Julius out. But I think even this wasn't the version of Naz Reid you were getting in November and December. This is a different leveled up player. And I think really is the case for the offense being a lot better, post All-Star break. If the Wolves somehow are 8th on offense the rest of the way, Naz Reid is a huge part of it, not just for what he's doing individually, but for what he loosens up. I think around him, that's really stood out to me lately.
That's what was so frustrating about the Washington game is if Naz is able to finish that game and he just has one little kind of boomlet like he had in the first quarter last night, they win that Washington game.
It's game over.
Right.
Yep.
That was what was so, and I think they were gearing up the offense that night to really play through Naz, right? And so you have to shift everything around as a result, and that just was like a perfect storm of everything that could go wrong in that Washington game going wrong. If Naz Reid plays 36 minutes that night, I'm almost 100% sure the Timberwolves walk out of there with a win.
Right.
And he's putting up the threes, and it's a different style of play. Obviously, Cat had the ball more. Naz is able to play without the ball a lot more than Cat did, but Naz has no hesitation when it comes to taking a high volume of threes. The way that Cat seemingly always kind of had, Cat always had that in the back of his head. Should I be taking this many threes? The team would always try to encourage him to take more threes. We saw him even a year or two in his tenure take a lot more threes, but then the numbers would always kind of come back down, right? Yep. And he always operated more inside. He just would never put up the volume of threes that a 40% 3-point shooter could or should.
Yeah.
And Naz has no fear. And that's one of the things you love about his game is that he is gonna fire away. And yeah, you think about the way he's shooting, you think about the way Dante was shooting before Dante got hurt. If he gets back to that level and just what that does for the offense, potentially post All-Star break.
Keel and Ant, it's a lot of shooting.
It's a decent amount of shooting that is finally starting to come around, and I think that's one of the for the Wolves, one of the unfortunate things about the Julius and Dante injuries is their injuries were so badly timed because both of them were really starting to come around. Dante, obviously, you could see it maybe a little more. Julius, you have to dig a little deeper, but the way Julius was playing before he got hurt here was really melding in with this team in a way that he hadn't been previously, and was really effective overall. And that's sort of the sad part about these injuries for these two guys, is finally when both of them were starting to find their stride with this team, they get hurt, and now weeks will go by before they're back on the floor again, seemingly. So that's kind of the I don't want to say not a hidden storyline with this team, but like one of the unfortunate sliding doors of this team is, man, both Julius and Dante, before they got hurt, were playing really well. It opens the door for Naz to play major minutes, obviously, every night now, starting and all that stuff. And you're seeing him take advantage of that opportunity. But I do wonder, man, if they were just full strength and Naz was playing like this and Julius was playing like that and Dante was playing like that, what this team could look like.
Absolutely. But even just the Julius one of as we started talking about Julius Randle trades way too early in the season, the only real piece of pushback I felt like I really had the whole time was, well, if you just do a Julius Randle trade that with the primary motivation being a salary dump, and it doesn't bring you back another power forward, is then Naz Reid becomes Julius Randle, and who becomes Naz Reid? What is the backfill process of that? And I think it's awesome that Naz is getting the opportunity to start. I think he probably is the best starting four on this team, given how well he's playing offensively right now. But Julius Randle is on the team, and Julius Randle is not playing bad like he was at the beginning of the season. He's being really helpful, and I think it's been interesting to remove him from the mix, have Naz be really good, and see the Wolves lose to the Wizards and to the Kings. And I know that's not all Julius. Ant was sick. There's this stuff. But, I mean, Chris, how much has Luka Garza has been the backfill, right? And, I would like to see Luka get some more chances, but Luka's really struggled in the Washington game and the Sacramento game, and that's really what's kind of coming in for Julius Randle being out, because Naz is still out there playing, he's playing with the starters, but playing his same minute load. This team replacing Julius Randle with Luka Garza and functionally Jaylen Clark. I like both of those guys. I believe in them, but we got to also acknowledge that there's a big gap between Julius Randle versus Luka Garza plus Jaylen Clark. And even Jaden McDaniels is doing a good job playing the four. They still miss Julius Randle, and that can be okay to say that right now that this team misses Julius Randle, and Naz Reid is playing really well. Until Julius Randle isn't on the team, they need him, and to be able to compete for this season. If that is the goal, and every indication we've gotten from Finch and the front office, whatever that is the goal this season. They miss Julius right now.
They do. And it's just, it affects the rotation. That's ultimately where the problem is. Yes, you bump Naz Reid up to the starting lineup and he looks great. But then, like you said, what happens as the game unfolds? Who do you have to turn to off the bench? The starters had no problem scoring last night, in part because of Naz and Jaden having such great nights, but the bench struggled to score.
Right.
I think Finch said 1 for 11 from 3-point range last night. Having Julius as, facilitator first, scorer second, but then having Naz coming off the bench to provide that scoring for that unit is such a huge lift. And that's the thing with these young players right now, and guys that don't play a ton of minutes, you just don't know consistently what you're going to get out of them on a night in, night out basis, which is why Finch is probably hesitant to go to them on a more regular basis, because the volatility of what they give you is greater than what Naz Reid gives you off the bench or what Julius Randle is going to give you on a night in, night out basis. Just you know what you're going to get. most of the time.
Volatility is the word there. That's
Yeah.
good. It's because it's
Yeah.
not like
It's not
like
impossible.
Luka can't be good. It's not like Jaylen
Right.
Clark can't be good. It's not like Josh Minot can't be good. But what we know about, well, particularly Minot and Garza, is there is a volatility that maybe is just a product of being young or inexperienced, and maybe you play them more and they get less volatile. But at this moment, when Julius Randle is out and you're needing to play one or both of them, it factors into Finch's calculus. Like,
And I think the
volatility.
I think the Fire Finch crowd would say you should have been playing them more to begin with, and they'd be less volatile at this point.
Yeah.
You know, you should have been playing Rob Dillingham more earlier in the season, and he'd be in a better shape now.
I think the Rob one is that's one argument. But were people saying that they should have been playing Luka Garza more earlier in the season?
I'm not as many as we're saying should play
Yeah.
Rob Dillingham, and I would even throw myself in there that Rob should have been getting more minutes earlier in the season. I wrote as much. Not Luka Garza though. But
it's the nature of the logjam that we're talking about,
right?
Of the like you said, the eight or nine guys, and like I guess they could have peeled it open to being 9 or 10 more. But then does Dante, if you had a 9 or 10 man rotation the whole season, does Dante get the minute load and opportunity to find the rhythm that he ended up finding? And maybe Rob comes with that. I'm not saying Finch has been perfect with that. I just think like the Dillingham thing is one thing. And then, okay, if Jaylen Clark and Luka Garza are a little bit raw, and Josh Minot, like, I don't know. That just seems like one that you kind of got to live with. And Luka, you got to make your shots, man. You got to play. Like, he's in his head. Luka's a confident player. He can hit those threes. He can hit those hook shots in the lane. But he got an opportunity, and I think he got in his head when he started missing a bunch of shots in the first half against the Wizards. And until Julius is out, until Julius is back, Luka's gonna have a role here because Naz gonna play 35 or whatever. There's still plenty of room around him. Just last thing, Chris, got any what are you thinking about for how the rest of this week rolls out? Expectations is kind of roll with it as it comes.
It was a weird week. We're just rolling with it as it comes. Trade deadline. You never say never, especially in this league that just saw Luka Doncic get traded. Yeah. But it's hard to see a major move out there for the Wolves. Something would have to really materialize. It feels like you never say never. But I think this is going to be more of a roster and a team that makes whatever moves it's going to make in the off season,
right? As
opposed to right now. That just seems to be where things are trending at the moment. And as for the ownership situation, who knows? We're just going to wait and see when that.
I think it's going to be hilarious when it comes out on trade deadline day. What?
Listen, who the hell knows at this point? This thing has taken so many twists and turns over the years.
Well, what I know is there's a deadline for sure on February 10th.
Correct.
There will be
yes.
There will be a form of finality by then, but as I understand it, it's just they're literally waiting on the email or confirmation from the lawyers who were the arbiters in the arbitration process there. So that's coming too. It's a chaotic sort of time. I mean, obviously Conley and the front office have been tight-lipped with this. I don't know. I don't think have a great understanding of what it is that they're targeting or not targeting doing here. I think, Chris, the thing I keep coming back to with all of this is just the nature of being in the second apron and whether it be the Wolves themselves or the league as a whole, never having played this board game, because that's what I think trades are, the salary cap, all this. They've never played this board game with this rules. So it's hard for me, when I try to do trade deadline stuff or off-season stuff, I like to point to, okay, a team in this position in a previous season has done this, right? And and we could kind of put some of that stuff together and make a connection that a team has not been in this situation before that the Wolves are in the second apron with this. So I mean, we're gonna let it play out as it rolls, and just operate under the assumption that the Wolves front office is significantly more into Julius Randle than the fan base might be. But I also don't think that precludes the possibility of moving on from Julius at the deadline or in the off season, because there are other factors here too of Naz Reid and all that. Well, it's just we kind of gotta see how it plays out. Obviously, you'll be writing about it, whatever does or doesn't happen, and we'll be talking about it here. 27 and 23, you're kind of like right in that range where you can convince yourself to go either direction. I'm excited to see what it is, and yeah, we'll talk about it. Appreciate you doing it, man.
No problem. Anytime.
Again, in the show notes, go down there. You're going to buy this book. I think most of you are going to buy this book. This no matter what. Get the pre-sale thing in there. It helps Chris out to have the books sold in advance. He comes on here, talks to y'all for an hour a week, and it's a good and easy way to repay him for that, but also to recognize the hard work. Because I would just say, as somebody who has a similar job to Chris, it's really important for me in like the summer, particularly in August, to, as listeners of this podcast know, like I don't do shows in August, and it's really important to take that time to recharge and kind of find it. Well, while I was doing jack shit in August, Chris moved to Atlanta for a month to report on this book and put it all together. So click that link right down below there and order this book. And like we mentioned off the top, we're going to do something at Falling Knife closer to the book date's release of kind of, the book tour. No, where Chris will have books there, sign some books, and we'll talk more about it as the time comes. But yeah, I'm just I'm proud of you for making this all happen, and I think it's gonna be great. I'm looking forward to, rather than just getting screenshots that you send me like once a week, I'm excited to sit down with my book and
actually see it
and read it all. He's Chris Hine. You guys follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. I think that's his same handle on Blue Sky as well. Newsletters coming out today on Jaylen Clark. You guys can sign up for that very easily at the Star Tribune, and it's free there as well. We'll have Chris on next early next week. Next up is going to be Britt and I tomorrow morning. That'll probably be a little bit more trade deadline talk focused, and then we're going to kind of stay nimble. And Kyle and I will pop on if the Wolves make some sort of move, and otherwise, if they don't, we'll just kind of recap the deadline overall. But this week, we stay loose with it, and we'll figure out what we need to do there. But next up is Britt on Wednesday morning. Till then, he's Chris. Follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. See you tomorrow. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down.